My first question is from a reader whose husband has for some time been criticizing her for not contributing enough financially to their relationship. She has her own business, but he has for some time gone on and on about how they don't have enough money, although they've managed to survive financially and actually have considerable in savings. And he has been telling her for years that she should be making more money. Apparently when they got married, she made an agreement that she would provide half of the money required to sustain the household, which may have been a hasty promise since he has the means to, because of his education and so on, he has the means to provide considerably more than half of their household expenses. And she finds it much more difficult to provide that. And so she has struggled to ever make half of the household expenses and has really never managed to keep her promise. And so he's reminded her of that endlessly, pretty much, from the time that they got married. So he's always reminding her how she has not made enough money in the past and how she hasn't gotten the jobs that she's promised. And they've moved quite a bit since they've gotten married, and so each time they move, it takes her time to get a job, and that makes it difficult for her to make the money that she's agreed to make. So she says, I have helped create a monster by trying to talk with him and defend myself over the last few years. And of course, when somebody feels victimized, which it sounds like he is, anytime somebody goes at you and repeats the same thing over and over again, they're coming from a victim place. They're saying, look what you did to me. That's the only reason that somebody would keep repeating a thing over and over again. The more that you defend yourself with the victim, ironically, the more right you make them. So you would think that when a victim comes at you and says, and pounds you with look what you did and look what you did, each time they do that, essentially they're saying you have to defend yourself. Now the irony here is that when you defend yourself, you actually make them more right. Because each time you defend yourself, you're saying, well, I was wrong. The only reason to defend yourself is if you were wrong. And it confirms that you have a need to defend yourself. And the only way really to make this all stop is to get off the entire field of death and stop defending yourself. So it's a terrible habit to get in with victims. Often the best thing to say is, well, you're right. I haven't made half the living. And it may be that I never will make half the living. So we'll get to what you can do here in a second. With victims, defending yourself will never make you happy, and it'll never make them happy. You continue. In doing this, I'm finding it really hard not to react to him and the hurtful things that he says to me. I immediately go into let's talk this out, hoping we can reasonably sit down and look at it objectively and find solutions. In his mind, it's up to me to prove to him that he can have faith in me. And see, you don't prove faith. One cannot do that. Faith isn't about proving. Your partner chooses to trust you. That's what faith is about. It's a choice. So your partner chooses to trust you and love you, or he doesn't. That's what love's about, is making a choice. So you then work toward a solution, or you choose to be miserable. And I suggest that that's what you choose to tell him. You tell him that you choose to be happy, and you choose to work toward a solution. See, he comes at you and he pounds you with what you haven't done. And then, regrettably, you're jumping on the field of death with him, and you're defending yourself. Well, that's never going to work. because all he has to do is bring up your past mistakes, and he can pound you with those forever. So tell him, you're right. I haven't made half the living. Well, I probably never will. I probably never will make half the expenses, so what are we going to do? Is it going to be essential to you to create a loving relationship that I make half the household expenses? If so, then, maybe we can't have a relationship. But a loving relationship isn't based on money. And point that out to him. Look at all the people that we know of in our lives who have a relationship based on money. Point out to him all the people that you know of where there are partnerships where they do bring in equal amounts of money. Are they happy? Genuinely happy? No. I know dozens and dozens of people where each partner brings in half the household expenses. They're not happy. I know many more people than that where they bring in bushel loads of money, even if it's not half each, and they're not happy either. So it's not about money, and I happen to know more about your particular partner. His mother had tons of money in her life, which is where he gets this attitude. So his mother had a lot of money, and she taught him that if he had sufficient money, he'd be happy. But his mother was a miserable human being. And in his previous marriage, his wife brought in half of the money, and he still wasn't happy. So he's already proven from his own experience, from that of his mother, from that of his previous marriage, from the experiences of other people that he knows, that this business of if only you'd make half the money, I'd be happy, he's already proven that that is a lie. And so you need to just get rid of that and say, we're not going to talk about that anymore. And your problem is that you do keep talking about it. You've been talking about it for years. So you need to say to him, Fred, we're not going to keep having this discussion. And anytime he starts to bring it up, you say, no, we've had that discussion. Money will never make us happy. You've proven it. We're done with that. So your question to him is going to be, do you want to be happy? And when he goes, well, but, Fred, do you want to be genuinely happy or not? So his answer is going to be a yes or no answer. Well, yes. Great. Then it's, pretty much a fact that if we want to be happy, love's the only thing that's going to work. So now the next question is, do you want to learn to be unconditionally loving? That's the real question, because that's something I think I can help you learn to be. That's something I can facilitate both of us learning to do, because the answer is not in money. So that's what the two of you want to learn to do. It's not in money, and there's no sense our talking about that. So, like you say here, my participation has furthered this problem immensely, and I feel discouraged. I shake my head in disbelief because until he started to prepare our taxes, we were loving and close. Well, I doubt that. Before you started to prepare your taxes, you were just avoiding the difficult subjects and getting along. That's what was really happening. You were just avoiding the crises. And now that the money subject has come up, you're dealing with just some of the things that frighten him. But perhaps it was just imitation love on his part. Exactly. Now he's distant, marginally cordial, and will not even allow me to touch him. Yeah, exactly. So there are many, many couples who tell me, well, we were getting along just fine, and then blank came up. Yeah, sure. So the two of you were getting along with an equitable exchange of imitation love until a thing happened. And that thing simply unearthed the problems in your relationship that had been there all along. And so, actually, I'm thrilled that whatever it was happened, so that now you have to deal with the problems that have existed all along. And then you go on talking about the money problems in your relationship, but again, it's really not about money problems. Eventually, we have to face what's really going on in our relationships, which is the absence of unconditional love, which has been going on for both of you from the very beginning. So if the two of you are willing to talk about that, if the two of you are willing to read through the marriage book together, for example, complete the 40 days, you'll discover that there are many things in your relationship that you've just never talked about. And most couples never do. They never get to these things. They exchange imitation love at an equitable level. They just avoid crises, and they call that okay, because most couples do. They've seen their parents get along at just okay. Their parents really, many of their parents just never had a really violent argument, and so they call that an okay marriage. Well, it's really not. Surviving is not okay. You can do a whole lot better than that. Here's a reader who says, I picked up my daughter from the mall, where she had been for 6 hours. And as soon as she sat in the car, she fussed and sighed and said, why couldn't you let me stay longer? Why don't I ever get to do what I want to do? And then she pulled out her phone and began texting her friends whom she had just left at the mall. How do I handle a tantrum like that? So first, it's obvious that this child has had many tantrums like this, and that you haven't known what to do, or she wouldn't be having this one. And here's a child who is enormously ungrateful. She has no recognition at all for what she has. She has a life filled with lots of good things, and she fails to get one tiny little thing in her life, and she has a little fit. And she's been allowed to have little fits over and over again, or she wouldn't be having this one. So it's really important for us to help teach our children to be grateful for what they have, which is different than teaching them to be grateful to us. Teaching children to be grateful to us is just a matter of teaching them to feel obligated to us, which is what we've done when they were little kids and we gave them an ice cream cone, for example, and we do what virtually all parents do. You give the child candy or an ice cream cone, and if the child doesn't say something, and within a few seconds we say, now, what do you say? And that's not really teaching a child gratitude, although that's what parents think they're teaching their children, just to say thank you to us and to every adult that does something for them. But then, see, we're just making them say thank you. And now, see, we're just teaching them social obligation, and we're teaching them to say thank you to us. Well, then, it's just almost like a social reflex. And they don't really feel grateful in their hearts. They're like little parrots. So here your daughter, who I'm sure you've taught to say thank you on many occasions, gets in the car and she's not grateful for a thing. So what can you do? So in the first place, here she is texting over here on her side of the car, and she's not paying attention to a single thing that you're saying. So, I would pull the car over if by now you've driven away from the mall, and I would pull it into a parking lot or wherever you are, and I would stop the car, turn off the engine, and look toward her and say, in the first place, I would hold my hand out. And of course, she's going to ask you what you're doing, and I would say, let me have the phone. And I would hold my hand out until I got the phone. If she gives you any kind of grief about not giving you the phone, then I would say, well, you have a choice. You can either give me the phone willingly and with a smile on your face, or I'll take the phone for a week or whatever period of time you decide on. But we're going to have an important conversation, and we can't have it while you're texting. Then, after you've gotten the phone, then I would explain to her. I would say, and obviously you can do this in whatever style you want, but you need to practice having conversations like this with adults until you can explain this to her with zero irritation. You have to be able to do this in such a way that you're just teaching her and you're not the least bit irritated with her. Zero. So you say to her, in the first place, you say, I want to apologize that I have not taught you well up to this point. Because if I had, we wouldn't be having our present conversation. So the fact that we're having this conversation, I want to tell you, is entirely my fault. No blame of you at all. But I want to ask you a few questions. So first, how did you get the mall? How did you get to the mall today? And, almost certainly she probably got there through some means of yours. Either you took her or your wife took her or whatever. So you got to the mall because I took you. Okay? And while you were at the mall, you were spending whose money? Mine. And who came to pick you up? I did. And when we leave here, we'll be taking you back to whose house? Mine. And when we get there and have dinner, you'll be eating food that was provided by whom? Me. And you'll be going to bed in a bed provided by who? Me. And sleeping in clothes provided by who? Me. And you can go on to whatever length you want to. So in the end, you'll be living a life that has been generously provided by who? Me. You have a really pretty cushy life. You have great lists of things in your life to feel enormous gratitude for. And in the midst of all of that, and all I'm doing is really just telling the truth about all that you have. That's all really gratitude is. If you were to just simply see what you have, telling the truth about it, that's all gratitude is. It's not adopting a positive attitude. It's just seeing it. If you were to see that, you'd feel happy all the time. So you have two choices. You could, number one choice, you could see the truth about what you have, which is a lot, and you'd feel, just giddy. You'd just feel delighted all the time. Or you could take choice number two, which would be to ignore the truth about what you have all the time, and you could pick at the occasional little things that you don't have, like a few extra minutes at the mall, which is what you chose to do when you flounced in the passenger seat of the car when I came to pick you up, which would make you ungrateful and snotty and rude. That would be choice number two. Now, which choice did you make? And mind you, you can't do this with irritation on your part. It's entirely your choice. So, I just want to point out that at every moment of our lives we have a choice. We can see the truth about what we have and feel grateful and happy, or we can choose not to see what we have, which is really a lie, and be ungrateful and snotty. Which choice did you make? And so what I suggest to you, talking about your daughter, is that each time she does that ungrateful and snotty and rude thing, that you point out to her that she's making a choice. Now, that's teaching on your part and loving. Loving and teaching is what we do with our kids. If she consistently makes the ungrateful, snotty, and rude choice, at some point, that's when we teach with consequences. First, you do the loving and teaching all the time. And at some point, when a child consistently makes the ungrateful choice, then we give them consequences so that we can help teach them better. And then you sit down with her, but only after you've tried loving and teaching a lot of times. And then you say, it's really obvious that you're not getting this whole gratitude thing. So what I'm going to do is start imposing consequences until you get what gratitude is. And if you don't appreciate, if you can't see what you have, then what we'll do is start removing some of the things that you have until you appreciate them. Some people don't appreciate what they have until the things that they have are gone. So, it's just a fact. That's how some people are. So, for example, some people don't appreciate the fact that they had food until they don't have it. So after they've starved in a prison for, 2 years, then when they get out of prison, they go, boy, I really started appreciating some of the common things like food and toilets and running water. So we'll start removing some of these things like iPods and, phone privileges and trips to the mall and so on. And that's when you start doing some of those things. But you can't do it with the slightest bit of a punitive or angry attitude. And so that's how you teach children gratitude. First with loving and teaching, and then, if that doesn't work, with consequences. But there are children out there who just have zero sense of gratitude, whatever. And the idea of teaching them gratitude isn't, again, it's so that they will be happy. It is impossible to be grateful and unhappy. You can't do both at the same time. Whereas children who are ungrateful are whiny and miserable all the time. These are the kids who turn into victims constantly. These are the people who turn into the husband of the woman that we were just reading about as the first question. This is the guy who's ungrateful all the time, and so instead of appreciating the love that his wife brings to the relationship, no, instead of appreciating all the other things she brings, he focuses on the 50% of income that she doesn't bring to the relationship. You see? That's how important gratitude is. If we don't have it, we're dead. We're miserable. So that's why it's that important that we teach it to our kids. Here's a live participant who, let's see, or no, I guess we don't have a live question yet, do we? Donna?
No, I'm just...
Okay. All right. Actually, we have one. My granddaughter mentioned the other night that she often doesn't go to sleep because she stays up talking to her imaginary friends. She's 10. I didn't ask her to elaborate because it was already later than I was instructed by her parents to get her in bed. Should I be concerned that she hasn't outgrown this? She seems so mature in other ways, much more than I was at that age. So, you got a 10-year-old kid who has imaginary friends. Should you be worried? Oh, nah. Be glad that she's creative, has a good imagination, and ask her about them. Ask about their names. If all she has is imaginary friends and she doesn't have real friends, then, yeah, that's a little bit of a concern. Because all it shows is that there's, probably insufficient love in the kid's life, that she has to create imaginary friends in the absence of real friends. But again, what's the solution? It just shows that the child feels insufficiently loved, that she doesn't know how to form connection with real friends. So, what's the answer? The child needs more unconditional love, and if it's your granddaughter, you're not going to be able to solve this problem by correcting her parents. So the solution is going to be what? You loving her the best that you can. So talk to her about her imaginary friends. Talk to her about what she does at school. Learn everything that you can. You're going to talk to her about her imaginary friends. You're going to talk to her about what is she frightened of. You're going to talk to her about what she likes. You're just going to talk to her about her. You're going to listen to her about her, and her. You're going to talk to her about how much you care about her. It's going to be pretty simple stuff, huh? You're going to tell her stories about what it was like when you were her age. You're going to tell her stories about the things that frightened you when you were a little kid. You're going to make this kid feel ultimately cared about and safe. And as she feels cared about and safe, she's going to tell you everything that there is to know about her. And as she does that, and as you accept her, and as you love her, she's going to feel more confident and loved, and it's going to become more likely that she'll be able to form healthy associations with live people. Now, the more associations she has with live people, the more likely it will become that she won't need associations with imaginary friends. Yes? Kind of obvious. When I was a medical student many years ago, there was a lady that I met when I was in a mental hospital, and she actually had imaginary friends. She was institutionalized for her imaginary friends, and as she felt more and more unconditionally loved just in our visits, she lost her need for those imaginary friends. And I didn't even know what I was doing. I was just a medical student. So it's amazing the effect that we can have on other people just as we, in our fumbling way, just care about them. So you can do a lot as a grandmother, just in loving her. The more time you spend with her, caring about her, the more positive effect you'll have on her. But I wouldn't focus on trying to get rid of the imaginary friends. In fact, who cares? They're not hurting her. It's obvious that she needs them, or she wouldn't have them. I counseled a couple not long ago where the couple had struggled for many years, and she wrote me not long ago. This woman had been very angry at her husband for not doing everything the way that she wanted, and she was angry all the time. And I talked to her recently, and she told me that she came from a very loving home. So picture this. She and her husband had been locked in mortal combat for, pretty much from the time that they'd gotten married. And I asked her more and more about herself, and she said that despite the conflict in her marriage, despite the conflict with her children and her stepchildren, that she'd come from a loving home, and she wanted me to explain that. I said that that was utterly impossible. There was no way that she'd come from an unconditionally loving home and yet was having conflict with pretty much everybody else in her life. And she was offended. She said, how could I possibly know that she had not come from a loving home? And I said, well, it's really not rocket science. I said, you're angry all of the time at pretty much everybody, which could only really come from emptiness and fear. So I asked her more questions about her mother. And she said that her mother gave and gave and gave, which she called loving. And she said she gave to her all the time. But then she said that her mother always had high expectations of her, which she said was also loving. Now, you got to understand, she called that unconditionally loving, and the reason she did was because, this isn't hard to understand, because her mother said it was loving. That was her definition of love because, well, of course, her mother would define that as love. She said, this is what love looks like. She said, I love you unconditionally. I love you very much. And when mothers love their daughters, they have high expectations of them. So, naturally, what do you think her daughter thought love was? And her mother always got her way. So, here was a mother who, this was the woman's mother, this was a mother who did give a lot to her daughter. She spent a lot of time with her. She gave the daughter pretty much all of her time. But the daughter paid for that by always doing what the mother wanted. So she did get a great deal from the mother, but it was an absolute one-for-one trade. So she got a lot, but she had to give a lot in return. So then, and so of course the daughter accepted that as love. So then the mother died. So then when the mother got older, she expected that love would look like that when she got older. So when she got to be the age that her mother had been, and she got married, she expected that she could do exactly that with her husband. And she expected that she could give of herself a whole lot to her husband, which she did. And she expected that that the more she gave, the more of a stranglehold she would have on her husband. And her husband pretty much was a similar kind of guy. So he expected he could have a stranglehold on her. And the two of them choked each other nearly to death. And they were together for many years. Well, eventually they got divorced, and it was bitter and hateful and angry, and there was physical and emotional abuse. And they just about nearly killed each other. Well, then she got married again. And she learned a few things, but not much, and expected she could do the same thing to the second husband. Well, by now there are stepchildren involved, and she tried to modify her technique a little bit. She tried doing it a little sweeter, but she tried doing the same kind of trading. So everywhere she went, she tried being very sweet and loving on the outside, but it was the same trading game. So she professed great love for everyone by doing a great deal for them, but there was always a hook in it. Everywhere she went, she would reach out to do something for people, but as soon as she touched them, she sunk a hook straight in their cheek and expected to jerk them around for the rest of their lives. And it turns out that they didn't like it. And she learned that from the time she was a little girl. She felt entitled. And see, it was kind of like, well, but I did what my mother told me to do, and so once I get to be the age of my mother, then other people should do what I want them to do. I paid the price, she reasoned, so why wouldn't everybody in my life then pay the same price that I paid? And, you know, in a world of trading imitation love where everybody keeps score, her reasoning makes perfect sense. So it's only understandable that she grew up to be an adult who was just furious at the world because everybody wasn't willing to pay the price that she paid. And she couldn't understand why, you know, everybody was mad at her. But everybody wasn't willing to. And there are lots of people like that. Here's somebody who says, can you speak more about how to approach and love a partner who thinks that all of this real love stuff is all bogus crap and is tired of hearing about love and getting and protecting behaviors? Oh, sure. Easy. You don't have to ever refer, for one thing, to any terms that they might regard as being part of something they're not familiar with or something they don't want to study. So For example, you don't ever have to refer to getting and protecting behaviors. So in my home, for example, I never use the term getting and protecting behaviors. You don't really have to. I use them in seminars sometimes just, for the sake of technical clarity and to introduce the concepts to people who are new in real love. But when I'm around people, who are familiar with real love, I don't use the term getting and protecting behaviors. I don't use the term imitation love, hardly ever. Real love is really very simple. When we don't feel loved, we behave in selfish ways. There. That's really simple. Selfish ways describes all the use of imitation love and getting and protecting behaviors, doesn't it? Pretty much. Or when you're describing somebody who's angry, you just say they're angry. You don't have to say that they're using attacking as a getting and protecting behavior. You just say angry. When you're using any of the getting and protecting behaviors with your partner, you can just say, I was selfish or I was unloving. You don't have to label it with any particular brand of behavior. For one thing, keep it very simple. Selfish, unloving. That helps when you're talking to a partner. And when you've got a partner who, for example, doesn't want to talk about all this bogus stuff, all you have to do is, for one thing, talk primarily about yourself. So you say, hey, I apologize, I was being selfish. And you focus mostly on you. So you talk about the mistakes that you make. And then only periodically, if you can see that your partner is just miserable, do you ever make reference to them. So let's say that your partner is, for example, addicted to anger and just keeps doing it again and again and again. Then rather than make reference to any of the real love terminology ever, it's very simple just to say, I'm not trying to control your behavior at all. I'm not trying to get you to do anything. I do notice that you're not happy. That I do notice. And you keep being not happy. And because I care about you, only because I care about you, if I didn't care about you, I'd watch you be unhappy and say nothing. In fact, if I really hated you, I would be tickled that you're not happy. I would rejoice in your not being happy. I would say, oh, hallelujah, it's another day of Fred being not happy. That would thrill me. In fact, I would be glad to watch it continue. But I don't. I don't like watching you being unhappy. And so, especially because I care about you, I'm saying something. You're miserable. So, do you really want to keep this up? Do you really want to continue the rest of your life miserable? Do you? It's a question I'm asking. And because it's continued, unabated, unchanged, I've watched you be unhappy for how many thousand days in a row? Pretty much without interruption. The only time that you appear to be anything other than unhappy is when, for brief periods of time, you're enjoying some form of addiction where you're just like, okay, but so what? Who can't enjoy some kind of like okay when they're shooting up with whatever? Drugs, food, sex, whatever. But I just observe that you're unhappy most of the time. And I care enough about you to say something to you when you're unhappy. Other people don't. Other people don't care enough about you to say something. They just let you be. They just let you go. It takes real guts to say something to somebody who's unhappy, because we've all learned, haven't we, that when somebody's unhappy and you say something to them, they tend to bite your head off. So, the only reason I ever mention anything to you about real love or anything else is that it works. It helps people who are unhappy find happiness. That's it. That's the only reason I ever talk to you about it. Now, if you had something smarter, if you had something better that worked better, I'd be going, cool, I'll never talk to you about real love again. Go for it. You got a better plan, I'll lay this one down. Really, I will. But I haven't heard a better plan. So it's pretty easy to tell me you don't like hearing about this, but that's only because it requires effort on your part. But it's cheap and lazy to tell me you don't like something when you don't have something that works better. So just telling me you don't like it, boring. So what? That's like a kid saying, I don't like homework. Well, yeah, I'll bet you don't. But until you got a better way to learn the material that you have to do to get through school, so what? You follow what I'm saying? So just because a partner says they don't like it isn't a reason for you to back off and go, oh, well, my bad. Sorry I brought it up. That's why they tell you they don't like us. They're trying to get you to go away. My wife and I are both in a second marriage. Each of us have teenagers from a previous marriage. So we're each experiencing the new learning of step parenting. You'll be learning that for the rest of your life. As a father, I notice the difference in my natural feelings for my natural-born children and my stepchildren. I can imagine that for a mother that might be even more pronounced since she actually gave birth to her own children. In your recent seminar, you suggested that the most successful way to raise children together in a blended family is to not differentiate and to raise them together as if we were both their parents. I find that the step-parent always seems to be more inclined to focus on justice rather than mercy in daily situations. Yes, you're right. The natural parent seems to be better at a balance. This is creating even more inconsistency. In other words, natural parents treating their own child with love and mercy and stepchildren with more justice. Can you provide thoughts? Yeah, sure. Everything gets easier if you make decisions from the foundation up. If you don't, it's kind of like if you decide we're going to build the house from the walls. Well, if you do that, you're screwed. So let's build the house from, let's pick the windows and install them first. We'll do the windows, and then we'll build walls around the windows, and then we'll do the carpet, then we'll do a roof, then we'll do doors. Oh, oops, let's do the foundation now. Well, you're going to have one whale of a difficult time now if you do everything else and then you do the foundation, because now everything else is going to be screwed up as you try to install the foundation, not to mention which everything else has probably fallen down by now. So if you make your foundational decision first, everything else gets much easier. So you have to decide first, are you two parents willing to make unconditional love the foundation of everything you do? Period. If you're willing to do that, you're going to win. So then second, are you willing to make each other first before the kids every time? Are you willing to make sure that you love each other first before the children make the primary decision the first thing? That's critical. So that at no time are the kids going to get between you, ever. No single child decision will ever get between the two of you. Because if the kids get between you, then the kids will die. Kids come and go, but you two are going to stay together. Critical. Next. The kids are yours. All of them. If you do the kids as yours and mine, natural kids, stepchildren, then the kids are going to tear you apart. They are. It's going to be a mess. Now, I understand this business of having kind of natural feelings towards the children that were born to you. I get it, which is why if you do that second decision, you're not going to get screwed up. So if you say that the two of you are first, then see if you make joint decisions as much as possible. So that way the two of you are working together, then the two of you will balance each other out. Now I understand that in a given moment when the two of you aren't together, you'll make mistakes. Oh, who cares? We make mistakes all the time, and later on you can correct them. So what? In any given moment you make mistakes, and then later on you go back to the kid who was involved and you say, I screwed it up. I used too much justice, or in this case, too much teaching and too little loving. And then it's easy. You just go back to the kid and go, here's how I screwed it up. Next time I'll do it smarter. But see, there's always next time. You just acknowledge that you blew it that time. Big deal. Kids begin to learn that parents make the same number of mistakes that kids make. You don't even need to, you can apologize if you want to, but what's the difference? Apologies just don't mean all that much. Kids get to see that adults learn and grow from their mistakes exactly like they do, and that's actually a wonderful thing. How do we get kids to learn and grow and repent and all of that unless we model it for them? Hello? We ask them to tell the truth about their mistakes and learn and grow from them without our doing it first, without our showing them how to do it. So, yeah, I understand everything you're saying, all true. And we learn to get over having this natural prejudice toward our own children by practicing. And so we need to learn to get over this natural prejudice. We need to learn to do it correctly with both our natural children and our stepchildren. We need to learn to balance this mercy and justice, which is really a balance between teaching and loving, so that we do, as it says in the parenting book, what's called love and teach. And one great way to do this is to do what's taught in the parenting book, which is to have preferably daily, they only need to take 10, maybe 10 to 15 minutes, have daily family meetings where all the children are together and where both parents teach a family meeting where initially you can just read out of the parenting book. And if you read out loud out of the parenting book just a few pages at a time, then what happens is the family, instead of being ruled out of whatever capricious thing comes out of one parent or the other's head minute to minute, that's just hellish. That's the kind of world that the Greek and the Roman gods, created. That's what you see out of the old Greek and Roman mythology. It's like, well, let's see, the god of war is in a bad mood, and so all the world is, hellish. No. If you have all the family there together and you teach the principles out of the book, which are just loving and teaching, now everybody's on the same page, so that both the children and the stepchildren and the parents are all governed by simply true principles. Now, there are no surprises. Now there are no favorite children, and everybody is loved and taught the same. When Donna and I got together 100 years ago, we had 5 children and 2 children from 2 parents all blended together, and at one point we had 6 teenagers in the house at one time. You can imagine how difficult that could have potentially been. But because we were having daily meetings and the children were all being taught the same principles, the potential clashes were kept at an astonishing minimum. The business of, well, there's one set of rules for one set of kids and one for another set, that conflict was kept at a striking minimum. No, everybody lives under the same rules, including the parents. If you're reading these principles every day, it's very difficult for the parents to say, well, we're going to do this, which is in contravention to the rules, when you've just read the rules that day. So it's principles that need to govern our lives, not whim or power or authority. So that's what I suggest you do. It's fun to be governed by principles. It instills peace and harmony and a sense of confidence and safety in all the children. Although, obviously, sometimes they'll buck against principles even, but overall, it's just much more fun. Here's a man who is talking about his 11-year-old son in the 6th grade, very responsible. And in the last few months, he says he's found it difficult to maintain a practice schedule for band, 120 minutes per week. A month ago, when he fell behind, we said he couldn't play video games or watch television until he caught up. He didn't like that, but now he's fallen behind again and doesn't seem all that concerned about the consequences. Now, here's my problem. I know how this would have been handled the way I was raised, and now I get to be the grown-up. And deep down, part of me wants him to fail so I can teach him a lesson and exercise some power and self-righteousness for myself. Now, this is some of the best honesty I have ever heard. A parent who wants his kid to fail so he can essentially get him. I think all of us parents have had some of those feelings at some time or other. It's like it gives us an opportunity to exercise power over a kid. So here I am, he's fallen behind again, but what I want to teach him is love and responsibility, not fear for messing up. And I certainly don't want to do something just so it will make me feel better in that temporary imitation sort of way. So any thoughts? Yeah, sit with him and talk to him more like this. You say to your son, Fred, I haven't done a very good job of telling you what I want from you. I'm not trying to get you to do your homework or to practice for band or any other particular sort of thing. So do you know what I'm really trying to get you to do? And of course, he won't really know. Tell him what I really want to get you to do in this is to be happy. That's always been my goal, and I've done a lousy job of communicating that to you. So why is it that I talk to you about practicing for band? It's because when you practice for band, you'll enjoy it more. And if I were to just let you go and you didn't practice for band, you'd show up at school, you wouldn't have practiced, you'd have a lousy time in band, the teacher would be mad at you, it would be a more miserable experience for you. So practicing helps you to play better, and then you enjoy band more. So the reason that I encourage you to practice for band is just that it will be a more pleasurable experience for you. So if I didn't care about you, if I didn't care about your happiness, then what I would do is just sit back and let you fail. And you'd be more unhappy. See, kids think that we make us do things for some pleasure that we get out of it. And you need to get that point across to him. If you make him practice for band, what do you get out of that? Nagging him doesn't give you some sort of pleasure. You don't sit back and nag him and then go, oh man, that just sort of gives me some little scratch all over. And say it to him like that. Kids need to see that we have some sort of sense of humor. But you do care about him. So when he practices, he enjoys band more. He gets some sort of sense of responsibility. And it's going to teach him something that he's going to carry with him all the rest of his life. because all the rest of his life, when he does a thing better and learns to be more responsible, it's going to help him in his job. It's going to help him in a million different ways. So you're doing it for him. When he plays the instrument better, you don't get spit from him, from his practicing band better. So, and then if he practices, and if he gets the practicing done, then he gets more freedom from it. When he gets his practicing done, then it's kind of like a get out of jail free card. When he's done and his chores are done, then there's no nagging, no nothing. He gets to then go do whatever he wants to do. Like with my kids. When our kids did more chores than their friends, I mean, they used to go out and plow the fields. They used to go out and weed big patches of ground in the backyard. But as a result of their having more responsibilities, they didn't have curfews. They didn't have limitations on their activities that their friends did. Give him some freedoms like that. So tell him, when he's done with this and this and this, then he can do whatever he wants to do. Tell him you want him to be able to play video games. You want him to be able to have fun doing it, and name some of his freedoms that he has, and tell him that you want him to be able to do those things. You are not trying to restrict his freedoms. So name the restrictions that he presently has when he doesn't do his band stuff, and tell him you want him to be able to have fun. You are interested in him being happy and enjoying his life. So communicate that you're actually on his side. Our kids don't hear that enough. Make it more, fun sounding. That when he does his band chores, that he'll be happier, that he'll be more accomplished, that he'll be more responsible, and that he'll have more freedom. And it will sound more like the two of you are partners in this thing. And it'll sound far less oppressive for him. So it's been fun talking to you all from Phoenix, Arizona. And we look forward to being with you again next Tuesday. Thanks for sending in your questions, and please do again send them again as usual to greg@reallove.com. We look forward to seeing you again next Tuesday, and between now and then, remember that as usual, it's always about real love. See you next Tuesday.